You're a bit inclined to focus mainly on the mainstream of the sheep and the cattle and the dairying and that sort of thing, but quietly chugging along is the goat industry, as I found out when I talked to Chris Sundstrum.
Well, the goat industry is really one of the quiet movers. You know, it's just moving along in the background like the deer industry did in its early days. I mean, we had the hypes of the 1980s when everybody got into feral goats and they were worth nothing and lost a lot of money. But over the last few years, goat fiber's just been steadily going up every year, and it's probably averaging somewhere around about $17 a kilo across the board.
So, mental arithmetic, what's that going to return to a farmer?
Well, if you take an average doe kidding at 125%, you know, her and her kid will probably produce about 170, or her and her kid and a quarter will probably produce about $175 a year. And then you've got probably $30 odd worth of meat, $30 to $40 worth of meat on top of that. So you're over $200 a stock unit, which is quite good besides most grazing animals today. That's for your equivalent.
So as far as grazing is concerned, you've got some pretty good pasture here at the moment. Are they particular?
Yes, they are actually, but they're quite fussy eaters, but I feed them quite a bit of baleage, especially in the spring when the grass is soft and through the winter. They need a fairly high fibre diet, so they prefer grasses. They don't like clovers, so they'll leave a lot of clover behind. They'll only eat that when it's dry. So they actually improve your pastures because they eat all the weeds out, and the pastures are looking pretty good now. And I don't know whether you remember, Rob, when you were here about 7 or 8 years ago, and I apologise for the state of the pastures.
Yeah,
they've certainly improved since then. Yeah, and these have had nothing but you know, fertiliser on them. They've had no these haven't been ploughed at all.
So a flock of Angoras would work very well with sheep then. You could sort of different pastures.
Yeah, they work well with sheep. They work even better with cattle. You know, sheep and goats have similar worm types, whereas cattle don't. You know, they have a different worm type, so they can actually vacuum clean each other's worms. I try not to drench these animals now. I'm trying to breed worm-resistant goats rather than drench-resistant worms, so that makes it a lot easier, yeah.
So tell me about that, because how big is the genetic base now?
It's probably still quite small, you know, but we are getting the occasional import in from Australia, and Australia imports from South Africa. And some of the biggest South African breeders are now moving into Australia and setting up studs there, so, you know, we can get animals in from Australia, so they'll spread our genetic base. But, you know, we're breeding a pretty good animal here now, and unlike the 80s, our goats are pretty well up to world standards, and our fibres, you know, sold on the world markets at top prices. So it's...
I was going to ask you where your markets are, because obviously you've got quite a sizable operation going.
I wouldn't like to tell my competitor how much of the New Zealand market I have, but I have a fair slice of the New Zealand market. I get fibre from the North and South Island here, and it's all exported, bar probably 7 or 8 tonnes which are used by local mills, and that's scoured in New Zealand, but the rest goes container-wise to South Africa, to Port Elizabeth. That's where the centre of the mohair industry is for the world now, really. A lot of the European firms and Asian firms have moved into South Africa to actually do their partial or full processing the fibre there, so it's all done there now.
Breeding stock, I mean, are people looking for breeding stock because they're wanting to start up?
They have been. I mean, people have been looking for wethers, they've been looking for everything, because the returns these animals give really is quite fantastic. And once you learn to farm them, they are a wee bit different to farm. They're probably more like a merino than anything else, but they do very well on the high country, on the broom and the what do you call, briar.
Yep. The rougher the better for them.
The rougher the better. Well, they're deep rooting plants which drag up the minerals. So farming them on this sort of country, we have to put, you know, quite a bit of mineral into their feed. But they do pretty well out here too. You know, we're very happy with our returns.
And as far as other animal husbandry is concerned, you're obviously breeding worm resistance into them.
Yes. So, you know, that's one of the main things. Their feet are getting a lot better. Their feet were quite soft when they came out from South Africa because they come off the high veld there, which is quite dry and rocky and stony. You know, a lot of the goats came from, what would they be, about 5 inches a year rainfall over there. So it's a bit different, especially this year.
So, as far as new people coming into the industry, there is a lot of demand still?
Yeah, there are. I mean, last year I couldn't find goats for love nor money to buy. I had a lot of people wanting goats and I couldn't find them. You know, they were taking wethers and taking everything. I sold all my wethers, which I normally run through because that's when they're producing their highest price fibre as young animals. But I couldn't find any last year for other people. So, yeah, there was definitely a shortage last year. So people are slowly finding out that they're returning money.
And they'll be ideal for small block holders too, I would imagine.
Yeah, ideal for small block holders, but they're also ideal for larger block holders. I've got one rural bank manager down south who approached me when I was down there looking at a clip, and he said, "Could you get me some goats?" And I said, "Why would you want to farm goats?" Well, I was quite interested to find out what his problem was, and he said, "Well, I look after this place and I see the cheques that are going into the bank," and he said, "That's why I want goats." So, I mean, that was as good a recommendation as you could get, really, and but I haven't been able to find him any actually at the moment, but hopefully I will.
A new kidding season, so you're getting a new batch coming in?
Yes, I mean, I don't carry very many does. I mean, I'm only on a lifestyle block here. I've only got about 14 odd does, so most of those are kidded at the moment. But yeah, it's kidding time all around the country. Some of the higher country places kid a bit later. They'll kid sort of more October time, but we're kidding around here now, and they're looking good.